Welcome back into Live Now from Fox as we are taking a live look here over in Springfield, Illinois. That is where we're going for this next story and previewing something happening later on today. So 15 months after Sonya Massey was killed in her home, the former police officer who fired the fatal shot is set to go on trial. That former police officer, Sean Grayson, 31 years old, a former deputy of the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department in Central Illinois, has pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. Now, the trial is scheduled to begin today with opening statements. If convicted of murder, Grayson faces a sentence of 45 years to life in prison. Now, it's back on July 6th of 2024 that Massey had called emergency responders over a suspected prowler. When Grayson and another deputy responded and they entered into her Springfield home to report finding no one, Grayson had noticed a pan of hot water on the stove and ordered it removed. Now, according to body cam footage that is sure to play a key role in the trial, Grayson and Massey joked about how the deputy backed away as she moved the pan before Massey said, quote, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Grayson later told sheriff's investigators he thought Massey's statement meant she intended to kill him, yelled at her to drop the pot, and the subsequent commotion fired 3 shots, striking her just below the eye. Joining us now to discuss this entire case and also what we can expect as it heads to trial is Adante Pointer. He is a civil rights attorney with Lawyers for the People, LLC in Oakland, California. Adante, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So this case really, it gathered and garnered national and international attention over the last several years. We are waiting for it to officially get underway. Let's talk about opening statements, though, and bring up what prosecutors are expected to mention today during that court appearance.
Sure. Prosecutors are certain to discuss what the officers were actually there investigating, which was a prowler, and the fact that Massey herself had actually called 911 looking for help. I'm sure they're also going to mention the size disparity between the defendant, and as you can see on the video, it's not even close. He's a much taller, towering, young, virile, and muscular guy who's armed with a gun as well as police training and accompanied by a partner, versus Massey, who is a young lady, slightly built, who was in her own home, once again, asking for help and having a really basic conversation with officers until things went all the way left. So you can expect the prosecution to talk about how the officers did not follow their training, how they violated their policies of the department, and ultimately violated the law by shooting and killing her in her own home. So you can expect the prosecutors to focus on that, those critical moments, which the video shows, where deadly force was used against her and she died, shot in the face 3 times.
And we'll talk more about the video and some of the evidence that's expected to be presented during this entire trial. I mentioned earlier that responding deputy facing 45 years in prison if he is convicted on all of these charges. So the defense is really preparing their case as well. What is their strategy?
Their strategy is going to be one that we've seen oftentimes trotted out in these type of cases, whereas the officer is going to say, look, I was in fear for my life. And once I'm in fear for my life, I'm entitled to use really any degree of force, all the way up to the ultimate degree of force, which is deadly force, in order to defend myself or someone else from what I considered subjectively to be a critical threat to my life. Now, the defense will also focus on the fact of, hey, we gave her commands, she complied and didn't comply, and as an officer, I'm putting my life on the line, but I don't have to sacrifice my life in the line of service when someone is threatening me. So they're going to play up the threat that Massey posed, or I should say the threat that this boiling pot of water posed, which, as you can see, was several feet away from the officer when he ultimately fired a shot.
And then just a reminder that it was 45 years to life in prison. I just wanted to point that out if that deputy is convicted. Adante, let's focus a little bit on the strategy that police takes and that defense that you were mentioning there, where police are allowed to use this force if they fear that their life is threatened. How do those rules really work, and what are the standards that need to be met?
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to evaluate the degree of force that the officer claims was a threat to him. So, if she was pointing a gun, that's a pretty easy one for a person to say, hey, they're pointing a gun directly at the officer. They've threatened to kill this officer. The officer's entitled to defend themselves or others. Here in this case where you have a boiling pot of water, which a person would have to throw, and it's only one throw, if you will, at an officer. The question is going to be, was that really a threat? And the defense, once again, will play it up when he's facing 45 years to life in prison. The prosecution is going to say, absolutely, this wasn't just justified by deadly force. This was a situation where an officer overreacted. This is a situation that did not deserve any force, and the officer instead escalated the situation into the demise of Sandra Massey. So those are the rules, if you will, that are going to be debated around here. Was the force reasonable or not? And so it's not from just the subjective officer's standpoint. It's supposed to be an objective officer standpoint, meaning if another officer was in that officer's position, would they respond? Would they act in the same way?
Besides that body cam video that is certainly to be key during this entire trial, excuse me, what other evidence could we expect that the defense and prosecutors are going to present?
Sure. Well, prosecutors and the defense have been sparring over what information should be provided to the jury, meaning the information leading up to the shooting, as well as the information that evidence that could be derived from the videotapes after the shooting. And so some of that is the officer dissuading, discouraging, and trying to prevent, if you will, his fellow officer who was there on the scene, who did not shoot, by the way, from going to get a medical kit in order to treat Massey from her injuries and hopefully save her life. And so that's a part of the prosecution's argument, saying, hey, this officer was not performing his duties in line with the standards, and actually was more so trying to encourage and promote her death versus save her life. And so, and leading up to the shooting, which also going to be critical, is what information did officers have? Did they know that Sandra Massey, in fact, was the person who called herself looking for help? Did they know that she suffered from mental health issues and things of that nature? Because that all plays into what the officer's decision making really was based upon. What was the foundation? And we do know that he knew that she had called 911 because they came into her house to tell her, hey, we looked for the prowler and we didn't see anything. And so, as you can tell from the video, Massey saying is on instant contact, please don't hurt me. Some might say that was a premonition of things to come.
Adante, how does this case compare to some other cases that we've seen in the past when it comes to normal people kind of going up against law enforcement officers and some of the tactics that they have used?
Well, when we think about other cases and other situations, this is akin to cases when we've seen officers tried where prosecutors have taken on if you will, an all or nothing approach. Keep in mind here, there was not only a murder charge, but there are two other lesser included charges that this officer was facing. On the eve of trial, prosecutors dismissed those charges and instead have gone solely for murder charges, which is why I say it's an all or nothing strategy as relates to prosecution, because it does not leave jurors with an option to convict him on a lesser charge. Instead, jurors have essentially one way of convicting this officer and potentially holding them accountable, which is a murder charge, which, as we know, is the most severe charge that could come out of this.
You've laid out some of the points that could be brought up today in those opening statements. Dante, what are the particular challenges that are faced when trying to prosecute a law enforcement officer and they use the defense that they are on duty and they are allowed to, again, see fit what must be done given a certain instance?
Well, many people, really don't understand the rules and regulations associated with law enforcement. However, their brain or just their experience tells them officers show up every day for work. They're there to protect the public, and they don't show up looking to want to kill someone. And, they're under all this pressure. And of course, we all want to go home to our family, our children, and so on and so forth. And so jurors tend to give law enforcement a lot of leeway and extend a lot of credibility and credit to what they say. However, when you get into a court of law and you're going to have a battle of experts who are going to be explaining how law enforcement are actually trained and the way their policies work and what they're expected to do, then that's how you have to overcome this credibility advantage that officers start off with. And you have to really get into the details, in the weeds, if you will, as it relates to what is actually expected of a law enforcement when they're performing their duties. Because once again, due to television, movies, and just pop culture, we have a pretty skewed thought as it relates to the public as to what a law enforcement is actually allowed to do. And it's not necessarily consistent with the training or the law.
Adante, it's expected that a lot of eyes are going to be on this trial officially starting today with those opening statements. Anything you think that the public should really keep an eye out for as we move into the next several weeks?
Yeah, well, a part of this, as I mentioned, is going to be the battle of experts. Both sides, the prosecution and the defense, have retained experts who are going to come in and talk about whether or not the officer followed policy and their training. And then the prosecution will take that and say, well, they didn't follow the policy, they didn't follow the training, therefore he broke the law. The defense on the other side is going to say, hey, he followed his training. What was he supposed to do? You know, you have to give this officer some leeway. He is a public servant. So those are the two debates that you really got to keep your eye on, and how the police and the prosecution kind of marshal their evidence to support those arguments.
Adante Pointer, a civil rights attorney, we certainly appreciate your time this morning here at Live Now from Fox. There's still a lot to get to within this trial, so we hope to check in with you soon.
Yes, buckle up your seatbelts. It's going to be a rocky road.
You take care, Adante.